Good morning. My name is Tom Venditti, and welcome to Buttermilk Falls, the childhood playground of Mr. Rogers. So, Mr. Fred Rogers was born and raised in Latrobe, Pennsylvania, and his grandfather, Mr. McFeely, owned a beautiful campground waterfall cottage called Buttermilk Falls in New Florence, Pennsylvania. And this is where Fred Rogers would come as a boy after church on Sundays. An only child, Fred, for most of his life, till his parents adopted later. And he was very protected by his parents. That's the original cottage there, here, above the falls. What a great playground for kids. You need to come here if you haven't been here. It's just fantastic. It's really well maintained. It's very, very beautiful. So, when Fred would come here, according to the biography by Maxwell King, he would be allowed to play and roam and do what boys need to do. And his grandfather was encouraging this type of thing. So Fred had a lot of his inspiration from coming to Buttermilk Falls as a child. And as you come here along the path, you'll see various signs with Mr. Rogers sayings. This one needs a little repair here. But once again, picnic tables, things of that nature. So just imagine little Fred running around as a kid here. Well, little Fred became a big Fred, and as we know, he pursued a career in television, and he was raised as a Presbyterian, had a very positive experience as a child going to Presbyterian church in Latrobe, and his father was actually on the board of the Presbyterian Seminary in Pittsburgh, Jim Rogers. And Fred eventually went to the seminary to get his ordination. And so Fred was actually ordained a Presbyterian minister, yet he chose not to take a church and felt called instead to children's ministry, television ministry. So that was his first real split, I would think, with the mind of the Presbyterian Church on the role of the minister. And so Fred pursued his own course, what he felt God was calling him to. And this was a very successful career in children's ministry. And Fred met many, many people who were from all different faiths, Catholic and non-believers. Here's a beautiful saying by Fred: "Our world hangs like a magnificent jewel in the vastness of space. Every one of us is part of that jewel." And you know, it's interesting, as I go here to Buttermilk Falls and check out what's happening, I do want to mention that Fred had a priest friend named Henry Nouwen. And Henry Nouwen had these amazing insights into the human person and the soul. And Fred really resonated. And a lot of his sayings, I see a similarity there with Father Henry Nouwen. If you get a chance to check him out, it's a good influence on Fred spiritually in his adult years. They actually traveled together and met together. So here you could see just many different trees with all kinds of shapes here at Buttermilk Falls. Just fantastic. Fred has a beautiful song called Tree, 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 which he celebrates the gift of the tree. So when you come to Buttermilk Falls, there's all types of trees here. Beautiful, tall, strong, very nice trees. So as you can see, you know, we're progressing eventually heading to the falls. But it's a journey. It's a journey, and Fred had a journey, a spiritual journey. And his spiritual journey actually led him, believe it or not, to look into Buddhism for a while. So Fred was drawn to a more contemplative spirituality. Number 4. Anyone who does anything to help a child in his life is a hero to me. Think about that. You know, a world where children are a priority. That's what Fred dreamed of. That's why he focused on children. Jesus said that. Unless you become like a child, you cannot enter the kingdom of heaven. Fred understood that perfectly. Perfectly understood that. So Fred became, he was described in Maxwell King's book as sort of like having a Zen type of persona. And as a Christian, obviously Buddhism wasn't going to work for him. So he really became very fascinated with Catholicism. And his best friend became Archabbot Nowicki from St. Vincent College in Latrobe, Pennsylvania. So they developed a very, very, very close friendship. And obviously a close friendship would involve spiritual discussions, of course. So Archabbot Nowicki was in charge of a whole entire monastery and seminary. Like, he had a lot of responsibilities. He has died, but he was very competent, very knowledgeable, trained priest, abbot. So when it came to caring for the sick and dying, he was very aware of how the Catholic Church has handled this, and the Benedictines in particular. So when Fred got sick, this was obviously a turning point in his life, because he was looking forward to a really exciting retirement at St. Vincent. He was going to pray and live there, as well as fellowship, as well as teach. I mean, it was just incredible. The things I remember best about successful people is their delight in what they are doing, and it seems to have little to do with worldly success. So Fred was successful worldly, but that wasn't his focus, clearly. You know, he could have probably made a lot more money than he ever did. And there's tons of stories of how he was rejecting commercialism and things of that nature, and rejecting offers, even financial offers, because it would compromise the integrity of children's ministry. So Fred became really sick with stomach cancer, January of 2023. And so his spiritual journey was, taking a really quick turn. And he struggled. The very famous story of Fred questioning whether he was really a sheep. And Jesus talked about that, the sheep and the goats. And so, you would think this critical point of his life, if, a Presbyterian minister who's celebrated as a Presbyterian, he's calling Archabbot Nowicki to help him with these problems. And Archabbot came and spent a lot of time with him as he was dying, and answered these questions for him, and consoled him, and was a true spiritual presence in Fred's final days. Children's play is not just kid stuff. Children's play is rather the stuff of future inventions. Think how many people played going to the moon before that was a reality. Right, Elon Musk. So anyway, Fred received the last rites before he died, the Catholic sacraments. And this was with Joanne's permission. Joanne was fully consenting, and Fred was obviously heavily medicated. But clearly, anyone that understands the nature of a priest, his responsibilities, priorities, really. When we treat children's play as serious as it deserves, we are helping children feel joy. The people who help us play make a great difference in our lives. So Fred's spiritual journey culminated with receiving the Catholic sacraments before death, which, according to Catholic theology, God is the one who is obligated to work through the sacraments when they're administered properly and correctly. And Archabbot Nowicki was not a novice. Number 10. Often when you think you are at the end of something, you are at the beginning of something else. What a fitting way to end the 10 sayings of Mr. Rogers here at Buttermilk Falls. At the time, we're talking about the end of his earthly life. So we believe that God did act when Fred received the sacraments because he received valid sacraments from a valid priest, ordained Catholic priest. The only question that remains is, was Fred desiring to become a Catholic? And people can debate that all they want, but I think the evidence is clear that his love for Catholicism is what dominated his spiritual affections at the end part of his life, which is the end of the book, and the end of the book is what counts. How do you end your earthly life? That's what counts, my friends. The Bible's very clear about that. So, thank you, Mr. Rogers, for giving us a beautiful lesson on the spiritual journey and the freedom to choose how you feel God is calling you without anyone preventing you from doing what you feel God calling you to do. And in Fred Rogers' life, this was pursue Catholic spirituality, the contemplative prayer life, the pro-family, pro-life perspective on morality. Fred resonated with Catholicism, affirming that boys will be boys and girls will be girls. So we want to thank God for this wonderful lesson of a journey, a spiritual journey with tremendous meaning and bearing fruit along the way. So clearly, there were times during his life that Fred was a very happy Presbyterian. Loved his seminary professors. There's no one denying that or disputing that. And it shouldn't be perceived in that way. His pursuit of Catholicism was more a pursuit of something deep within Fred that wasn't being met within a traditional Presbyterian church. So he pursued what other and many other people have pursued, is a contemplative spirituality, chanting with the monks, liturgical, ritual, things that go down 2,000 years in history have been passed down. And the respect for life, traditional family, was all there in Fred's theology. So God bless you. Thank you for checking in. God bless Mr. Rogers. And we hope and pray that someday he will be declared a saint for the whole world to celebrate this beautiful man and his testimony of life. Amen.